Hi, welcome into my studio. Before I get on with the demonstration of this remarkable chimpanzee face, I want to talk about tonal value. And the reason I want to bring it up is because when I'm doing my critiques or when I'm looking online at beginners and novice artists, the one thing that they generally get wrong, it's the most important thing, it's the tonal value. So what is tonal value and why have I picked this subject to start with? Well, tonal value is the range from light to dark, and as you can see on this photo, there's a full range there of very light on the top of the forehead to very dark with those creases under the eyes. And here's a tonal value scale. So on the left we've got pure white, on the right pure black, and all those ranges, which could be any amount of number of ranges and subtleties in between. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying about the tonal range from light to dark. Now, not every subject is going to go all the way and have the purest white to the purest black in there. Let's think of a subject, perhaps a wolf in a morning or a late evening scene. Everything is subdued, so everything would probably be in that middle range, and that's fine. But most times when we're doing animal portraits or dog portraits or cat portraits, we usually want a wide range of tonal values because that makes for a much punchier image. Let me show you an example. Here's a photo of a crowned crane that I took. Looks pretty good. We've got lots of lights, we've got lots of darks in there. Looks like a good photo to work from, but actually it's not. Let me show you why. Now that's the photo with the full range, full tonal range. The blacks are really black, the whites are really white. So we've got that full range in there. Let's look at them side by side. Now you can clearly see how we've got a lot of tonal range and contrast on the left and very little on the right. So the one on the right is missing all those deep blacks, all that contrast, all those punchy whites. And this is what I'm generally seeing when people sending me in artwork to critique. They're lacking all that. Now, make sure when you print out your reference photos, if you're not working from a screen, you're using decent quality paper. That's the big deal. If your printout is coming out like the one on the right hand side, chances are when you do your artwork, it's going to turn out like that as well, because it's just too much for your brain to compute on making things lighter, making things darker, making them punchy. So tip one, get that reference photo printed out. Decent paper, glossy paper will normally give a punchier printout, and then you're off to at least a good start. Now, I was going to talk about image editing and things, but I've already done videos on that to prepare your photograph ready for painting such as this, and there's lots and lots of videos, excellent videos on YouTube freely showing how to make sure your levels and your contrast is correct in your photograph. So I'll leave that as it is. Now I've put a photo up on the screen of the stages I'm going to work in. That's the reference photo on the left hand side, the finished drawing, pastel drawing on the bottom. And if you're watching this from Patreon, I'm going to supply this sheet in links for you as well, so you can zoom right in and see exactly what I'm going to be doing. But basically, I'm looking at this project really for the tonal aspects. And you can see now I've talked a bit about tone, why I've picked this chimpanzee. It's really punchy. So number one up the top, that's going to be my tonal underdrawing. I'm just going to do it with a black pencil, a black pastel pencil, and a little bit of white as well. And I'm going to just concentrate on just working out where the darkest darks are going to be, the lightest lights. And I'm going to use a light touch. Number two, I'm going to show you a glazing technique. I'm going to use my pencil really lightly on its side just to glaze that flesh tone over the top. Number three, once I've done that underdrawing and that glazing, that's when I'm going to start detailing. I'm going to work the details on top, and because I've done that earlier work, it's going to go a lot easier than it normally would. The final image down the bottom, as I mentioned, that's the finished drawing. So let's take a look and let's get started. Okay, so I'm starting off, pastel matte paper, image is transferred down onto it. I've just taped it to my board, that's my reference image. By the side, I've just taken that section from the face, and all I've got a black Carbothello pastel pencil, nothing else. I'm keeping the supplies quite limited in this one. I'm not going and telling you all the different pencil numbers and all that. You guys know me by now probably, and I really don't like doing that, and I don't like teaching that way. I do mention it in some of my videos that if you want just one video, one lesson to get you going, so you can just buy a couple of pencils, the limited supply, and create something just to see if you like pastels or not. I've got a Tiger demonstration. Tiger for complete beginners, and it really is for complete beginners. That's available to purchase either as a download or it's already on this Patreon channel, so that'll be a starting one. Now this subject looks really complicated. I'm telling you that a beginner or novice can do this. Just take your time. Just follow along with what I'm doing. You're going to surprise yourself, amaze yourself and your family at what you'll be able to create, I'm really sure. Watch the video all the way through a couple of times. I'd advise just to get, you probably already got pastels if you're into pastels already, and probably got enough supplies, but the ones I usually use pencil wise are Carbothello and Pitt pastel pencils, and in all honesty you can't get enough of them. You always want lots and lots of different colours. The cheapest way is to buy them in the sets, and both those brands are really reasonably priced. So if you are interested in pastels and just starting out, I'd personally just get a set of Pitt pencils and a set of Carbothellos to start with, and then you can do little subjects such as this. When you become more experienced with pastels and you're starting to work larger, then you're going to want to get some other supplies, and I've got videos on other supplies just so you're saving your pencils, so you're not using pencils all the time for the underdrawing. So with that out the way, let's talk about what I'm doing now. And basically I'm looking at the tones, the tonal value. I don't care about the colour at all. Tonal value is the most important. You saw that little intro that I put on there. If your tones, your lights and your darks are not correct, if everything is not dark enough and other things are not light enough, you get that washed out appearance. That's why I'm using this black pencil. I'm not pushing hard, I'm going really lightly with it. You can see it just very lightly. I'm squinting my eyes, I'm looking at the reference, I've got that reference really close, that's important as well. And I'm looking at where the darkest parts are, and I'm shading those in. Critical things like around the eyes, you want to get the shape right, so I'm drawing that in first. I'm not pushing too hard. These pastel pencils, they come out nice and black without pushing hard. I don't want to fill the tooth of the paper up. So I'm just getting everything in position, and then I'm just using my pencil on the side, as you saw, to shade in the dark areas. The colours are going to come later in this piece. Let's concentrate on getting the most important element right first, the lights and the darks. People seem to get really obsessed with the colours, and think of it like this. If this chimpanzee was in a different coloured part of wherever he is, there'd be other light bouncing around that would be acting on him, so he'd look at slightly different colour. So if we had a simple idea, if we had a sunset, he'd have lots of warm colours on him. If he was on a cold day with an overcast sky, there'd be lots of cool colours on him. He wouldn't always have that fleshy coloured face. He wouldn't have, you know, the light on top of the forehead. All these things would change. But to give him shape and form, we need to get the tones right, the lights and the darks right. That's what's making him look three-dimensional. That's what's giving him the form. Under the skin are the bones, and that's creating lights and shadows on top of it. The colour is nowhere near as important. I keep saying it. It's got to sink in eventually, because it's the truth. Without a doubt, the light and the dark is the most important, and that's the main reason, the only reason I'm doing this video. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to speed it up a little bit. You're going to see me just shade in all these darks. Okay, so that's pretty simple so far. I've got the tones in on the one eye, and you can see I've not gone to extreme darks yet. No need for that, that's going to come later. I'm just putting in and shading in where the main darker elements are going to be, the shadows and the darker elements. Now you can see why I've used that pastel matte grey paper. It's acting as my mid-tone. When I start putting a few highlights on, you're going to really see the benefit of it. Don't go working on white paper. It's really difficult when compared to starting on toned paper. Now I could have used a pastel matte brown, I could have used the sienna. I chose the grey because it's more neutral and I really wanted to show the tone in this. I didn't want to confuse anything with colours. There's very limited colours in this piece. So I'm carrying on and just blocking in, lightly shading in those darks. And now I've got those darks in place, I'm just going to put in a few lighter tones. I haven't gone with a white pencil. This is really a very light grey. And you can see really lightly I'm using the pencil on this side. I'm not pushing into it at all. I'm just indicating where the main highlights are going to be. It's going to help me when I start to put the colours on. Now another mistake lots of beginners and novices make, they don't blend these underlayers into the paper. They leave them standing and sitting on top. I want to retain as much of the tooth of this paper as I can, so I can put as many layers on top as I can. With the layers come detail. So I'm using a stump. It's basically paper that's wound up tightly. You get softer ones and harder ones. This is a harder one. And they're really inexpensive to buy, so get yourself a load of them. The harder ones, when you don't want to move the pastel around and blend it out too much, that's when they come into their own. The softer ones, when you really want to blend it in, that's when they come into their own. Here I'm using the harder one. So that's a paper stump. The softer ones are made with rice paper. And you can see it's blending it all together, it's pushing it into the surface. When people say to me, I've run out of tooth for the paper, I can't get my pencils to sit on top of whatever they've put underneath, it's mainly because either they've put down too much pastel as an underlayer or they haven't blended it in the first place like this, and I'm just pushing it into that surface. I'm not using a lot of force, and it's something you'll learn with experience, but you can't go too far wrong with it. It's just blending it in. Okay, so that's the tonal underdrawing and underpainting done. Now I'm just going to use one pencil for this next stage, just as a pit pastel, 1122 stroke 189. That's all I'm going to use, and you'll see how that tonal underdrawing is really going to be useful. I'm using this with virtually no pressure whatsoever. I'm just glazing, so I'm letting this pastel colour sit on top of the darks and the lights underneath. As simple as that. And we can see through it, so that tonal underdrawing is doing all the work of the lighter and the darker shades. So you may not have seen this done before. I don't always work like this, but this subject, when I'm showing the tonal range like this, I thought it was the best way to show you exactly how important the tonal underdrawing is. And this is only taking a couple of minutes, and look, we're starting to come alive already. You compare that left side as we're looking at the screen to the right hand side. We've already, as I said, got some life coming into the drawing. I'm not using hardly any pressure, remember, so I've got virtually nothing in the tooth of the paper. I've got tons of tooth left to get my details on top, and I'm really going to detail this. It's only a study, but you know, I like to show you how far you can push things, so you can decide to stop at an earlier stage when you do your work, or you can really detail it as well. Just little hints of this fleshy tone going down. Okay, so that was pretty easy as well. So that's why I said I think a beginner can really do this. There's nothing complicated at all. Lots of beginners would be happy with something that just looked like this stage, but we can push it a lot more. I've just put a few highlights, a lighter tone in there, just to show myself where the those light elements are. I'm always trying to make things easy for myself. By doing the tonal values, that's making it much easier. So let's start to add some detail now. I've already got that fantastic map now on there. I can judge everything a lot more easily because I've done that layer. A lot of people, they start with something like the eye and they really detail that all the way. Then they may go a bit further around, so they do the skin under the eye and a bit over the eye. They do the underlayers and start building up. And when they get to the right hand eye, they forget the colours that they used on the left hand eye. And then they start to panic because they can't remember which pencils, because they've got a load, probably 50 or 60 pencils out on the table. Much easier to do it this way. Start building up all the underlayer, especially on these smaller drawings. If you're working really big, it can be a bit different, but when you're on small drawings like this, work the underlayer first and start to build up. You know the pencils you're using on one colour of the left eye, it's the same colour on the right eye. It just makes it a bit easier. So I'm just going to carry on now, slowly blocking things in. Add in more detail, add in more refinement, and just choosing a kind of like a chestnut brown pencil. I never ever look at the numbers and names on the pencils. It's irrelevant to me. I look at the tip of the pencil. That's more accurate than looking at the colour on the end of the pencil, on the back end of the pencil. They almost never look the same as they do when you put the coloured pencils or the pastel pencils down on the paper. The tip is a bit more accurate to look at. And on the left of my paper, out of screenshot, I've got a bit more spare grey paper there, and sometimes I try my pencils on there first, just checking the colour before I apply them to the paper. Now I think that eye is starting to look quite realistic already. Just a little bit of work done. We can go a lot better than that though if we just take our time, as I mentioned before, and keep squinting at the reference as well when you're working. We're looking at the main colours and the main tones. Forget about all the little creases and things like that at the moment. We don't need to concern ourselves with any of that. That's the icing on the cake. That's coming at the end. That's easy. No worries with that. Let's get these tonal values right as we start building up now our dark. So I'm pushing a bit harder on my black pencil. This needs to be very dark in these areas. They're the darkest parts. So I'm making sure, again, enough pastel down to make it nice and black. Sometimes I just blend a little bit with my finger. That's all I was doing there, nothing complicated. Sometimes you want a softer line, so finger's probably the best tool on a subject this size. And just a little rub will give a bit of a blend to it and make it a little bit fuzzy. Not everything is hard edged. Now I'm starting to use my grey pencils as well. Now the Carbothello, I've got an excellent selection of greys in there. Pits and the Carbothellos, lots of different colours in the two sets. And I mix and match and go in between them very frequently. Now some artists, they'll say to you, pick up pencil number 1122/189, apply it here. Pick up pencil number 1126, blah blah blah, put it there. That's just painting by numbers. Don't get drawn into that. You need to just put things down and judge the colours correctly. I show lots and lots of videos on techniques on how I simplify that process. One thing is getting the reference really close, another is folding the reference. So if you're struggling with this left eye, take a reference, print off two perhaps, fold it right down the middle of the eye, offer it up, put it over your pastel, let it touch on top of it. You will instantly see the differences between the photo and your drawing. We don't have to be a slave to the photo, but when you're learning, you want to try and get it quite accurate. You want to be able to see that you can match to the best of your sets. You won't always have every colour, but to the best of your ability in the sets you got, you want to be able to match it when you're a beginner in particularly. And by folding it and putting it on top, you will see it. Try it out, because if you haven't done it, it'll be amazing for you to see how far out sometimes you are. Sometimes you'll get it spot on, but this will show you. So I'm just going to carry on now and start to detail out from the eye. So as you can see, I've added quite a few darks in this section of the skin, and now I'm adding the highlights, because with pastels we generally work from the mid-tone, then I put the really darks in, then I put the highlights on. That paper that I've got my hand resting on, that's glassine, it's a neutral acid paper, so it's not going to affect the drawing at all, and it's just preventing me from smudging it. And that's another reason why I'm not detailing the right eye at the same time as the left, because I'm resting on part of the drawing. So I didn't worry when I did the underdrawing, I didn't mind that smudging at all. You know, I still rested on this glassine paper, but as I'm applying more and more details, I want to rest. I don't want to be resting on top of it much at all. So that's why I've done the major bit of work under there, got all my colours the same, and now I'm just detailing from this pretty much top left side down to the bottom right side. You can see this is not complicated. All we're doing is putting a light against the dark. Just take your time and study it. Don't rush all the time. You should be enjoying the artwork, the process of doing it. Don't go rushing ahead, trying your best to finish it within an hour or something like that. Take as long as it takes, and don't beat yourself up either. If you're a beginner or a novice or even advanced, we're all going to try things out. We're all learning lessons. You might learn more from your lessons when things go not as planned. You work out how to fix things, or you work out what you've got to do next time. Don't get discouraged and expect everything to click straight off. I spoke to somebody on my secret Patreon Facebook the other day that was getting discouraged, and I said, don't forget, I've got 20 years worth of art. I've only been doing pastels for about 2, but I've been doing oils for 20. Your brain connects the neurons from your eyes and what you're seeing to your hands and what you can create, and that takes time. You can't short circuit this, you can't rush it. It takes time for those things to work. If it didn't, I could show a person one lesson and they'd be as good as me the next day. Thankfully that doesn't happen. What I'm showing you is a technique so you can learn much faster, but you still got to put in the work. You still got to practice so that you get to see all the subtleties in the colors. When you're new to it, you can't see all the subtleties in the colors. You can't compute which pencil you need to pick up to create those colors or those tones. That's all experience. So take these lessons that I'm showing and the tips and practice with them, and it'll come along. I promise you it'll all start working, but it will take time. So you can see I'm starting to go gradually lighter on top of the darker underdrawing. Now this is quite an interesting area. There's lots of skin textures and recesses, but I can draw it quite quickly because I'm looking at just getting the general appearance of what I'm seeing in that reference. So I'm not trying to put in every little crease and every little mark and skin fold in exactly the right place. It's irrelevant. And I'm talking about that bottom left hand section now, where I've got that pinky flesh tone already. So I've got the pinkiness in there, and now I'm going over with a grey, and I'm using random strokes just to get the appearance of the effect. And as I said, I'm not trying to duplicate this. People are not going to see the reference photo and judge it by it and say, oh, you've gone slightly wrong there. It's irrelevant. I'm just after the appearance of that texture. So I'm just going to let this run real time for a while so you can see how I build that up. Okay, so I think that's about enough that I wanted to show on video 1. I'm just going to carry on, do a little bit more work on here. but I think we've already covered a lot of ground in this video. And as I said, if people are drawing along or painting along, don't you rush in things. Take your time. Don't have to be as quick as I am at all. You take as long as it takes. So there you can clearly see the detail left side to the underdrawn right hand side. And I'll see you all again on video 2.